Penance. Y'all say that with me.
Penance.
There you go. What is penance? Anybody? 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 Come on, guys. I know some of y'all are fresh out of school. What is it? Penance. I think the young man back there is Googling it. It is the act of being sorry for an act that you have committed. Right? You actually regret it. You actually regret this thing that you did. The Torah portion, Vayigash, I don't think I ever picked the right one, really. The Torah portion, Vayigash, it starts out with Judah pleading for the release of Benjamin. And it concludes with Joseph revealing himself to his brothers. There's some very interesting things that could happen between them. But what I want to focus on today is penance. The greatest penance, for it brings about healing to the world, according to the Talmud in chapter Yoma, verse 86a. Penance brings about healing to the world. When we begin to forgive ourselves and forgive others, it brings about wholeness and healing to the world. It is very much like the act of doing something bad or gossiping. If you gossip around someone, before too long, they will begin to gossip. They will begin to partake in that iniquity. If you do good and repent and carry that with you, then others will also pick up this form and they will begin to do this. Judah approached in Genesis and Bereshit 44 verse 18. Judah, the oldest of the brothers, actually the second oldest of the brothers, approached and said, "By your leave, my Lord, please give your servant a hearing, and do not let your anger flare up at your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. And if I go to your servant my father, and the lad whose whole being is bound up in his is not with us, and he sees that the lad is not there, surely my father will die. And your servant will have lowered your servant's father's gray head in anguish to Sheol. For your servant made himself responsible for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, I will stand guilty before my father for all time. So now please, let your servant remain as my Lord's slave in place of the lad, and let the lad go home with his brothers. For how can I go home to my father without the lad, and thus see the harm that my father will suffer?" Years ago when this had happened and they had betrayed Joseph, it was their anger, their resentment, these other things that spilled over. But then when they got to the house and they reported to their father, Israel, that his beloved son had died. They then had to go through years of experiencing their father's loss, dealing with their father's grief, attempting to console their father for their lie and their transgression. Later on, we begin to see that Judah himself experiences that very same loss. And not the death of one, but two sons. Paul seems to relate the story of Joseph in Romans 11 where we struggle with the question of Israel's rejection of Yeshua. Though he did not invoke Joseph as an analogy, he alludes to it in a few places in this discussion. He points out that Israel's rejection of Messiah has meant the inclusion of the Gentiles into the kingdom. And just as Judah and the rest of the brothers' rejection of Joseph brought about salvation to Israel itself years down the road. Joseph himself says, God has sent me before you to preserve life. Lemichaya, to preserve life. This is also the same word used when we are risen from death. For if their rejection has brought about reconciliation, what more will their acceptance bring? All of Israel will come and will have salvation, as it is written in Isaiah. The deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove the ungodliness from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Judah now approaches him and says, take me in your place. Take me in the place of Benjamin. Please don't let me have to report again to my father that he has lost another child. At first, in Judah's life, he's not this hero, right? He's not this guy putting himself on the line for others. He's the guy to say, yeah, let's sell it. But there's something beautiful in Judah that he is named our patriarch. That he would then go through the personal experience of loss and witnessing the grief in his father. That he would come about to repent and to truly change who he was. Do we have that same kind of audacity to change who we are, even though it's not convenient? How much his father loved his son Joseph. He made no secret of it. He made him a beautiful coat, kept him inside, allowed him to study. He got to be there in the AC. His brothers had to go and work in the field. Oh, he loved Joseph. And rightly so, his brothers were resentful, angry, and really detested Joseph. And Joseph did nothing to help encourage a bond either. He would often taunt, one day all of you will kneel before me. I will be grand. And you guys will be not. He continued with this manner until he too was made to be humbled by God. There's a certain amount of humility that we have to go through for God to lift us up to where he needs us to be. Sometimes we get caught off into doing this. Joseph wasn't the firstborn. I'm sorry. Judah wasn't the firstborn. He was the second. Who was the first? Reuben. Reuben, in his own account, he decided not to kill the boy. He said, Holy Ghost, surely it doesn't mean death for the boy. Let's just toss him in the pit and leave him there. That doesn't make it any better. Not when you're dividing shekels over your brother's loss. No amount of money justifies bad behavior or bad actions. Well, I'm making this because I talked them into doing that. Or one of the second questions they ask you in the heavenly court, according to the sages, is, were you honest in everything that you did? Including being honest with yourself, honest with God, and honest with other people. Were you honest? This means not getting over on people, right? The Torah says we have to deal with the stranger fairly. It doesn't say we get to get one over on them. The power of the story, however, comes not from Judah's courage of self-sacrifice and love for Jacob at this moment, but the power comes from knowing that Judah was not always so bold. The power in this story is knowing that he was weak. He was flawed. Incredibly flawed. But the power is in the teshuvah, the returning, the transforming, the willing to push through and change who you are for the kingdom. For God's sake, for His glory. And in that transformation, you and yourself are elevated. Wait a minute, why me and myself? Because there's no one that can do what God has called you to do but you. Nobody. You are the only one exactly like you. You can bring in your doppelganger. They might look very similar, but I promise you they are quite different in their behavior, in their characteristics, and in their methodology. Because they weren't raised how you were raised. They didn't go through the trials that you went through. They didn't have their own moments in the pit. They didn't have their own moments of getting over on somebody. They didn't have their own moments of being gotten over on. But you have been brought up into the time, into the season, into this place where you are to do your right and fair service for the King. That your life may glorify Him. That your life may be a testament to the goodness of our God. Well, I'm going to wait for tomorrow. Fair enough. If tomorrow doesn't come, well, I guess you waited too long. Yeshua says, run in the light while it is with you. That means while you have this revelation, while you have this chutzpah, this desire, this zeal, run. Do all that you can. Grab a hold of that torture stake and try and run it up the hill. We both know you're not going to make it all the way up the hill. That was a 300-pound piece of wood. But if you set forth on the journey, He will bring about people to help you get there. He will cause others to come alongside you, to walk with you, to encourage you. not to talk against you. There's enough of that behavior in the world. I like one of the jokes that a rabbi many years ago said, and he said, if the patriarchs were setting about their journeys today, what would the media in their political correctness say about them? Well, there's Moses, the guy with a speech issue, trying to set a whole bunch of folks free from slavery, only to die before he reaches the goal. Not the miracles, not the splitting of the sea, none of this other stuff. Just dies before he reaches the goal. But that's not who our God is. And that's not what we focus on in the kingdom. We focus on the beauty of the journey, the lessons that we learn, the goodness of our God. And perhaps paying attention to what He's trying to teach us. Instead of what Abraham's doing in the back row with a sweater that is clearly out of season. But rather we focus on what God is trying to show me. What God is trying to show you. To help mature you, help grow you, help to lift you up, so that you can then be like Joseph and bring about a form of salvation to many who will meet you in their lifetime. But if we keep running from the task, if we keep feeling we're unworthy or unqualified, guess what? It'll get done some other way. It will. If He told this to Esther, He'll tell it to you too. Or this morning, are we better than Esther? I'm sorry, I'm not bathed every day in pomegranate juice. Nobody rubs me down weekly in olive oil. I don't have my fill of the King's buffet. God bless her, she stayed kosher in that. But God will still cause it to happen. The point of Him trying to go through you is because there's something in you. There's something in you that will reach certain people. There's something in you that will bring about a certain light that will attract certain people out of the darkness. There's something in you that He needs for you to get with it, so that way He can begin to use you. That way He can begin to mature the kingdom, to grow the kingdom, to bring more people out of darkness in this time. But I can't right now. You don't understand. That's fine. That's fine. But while you're waiting to be qualified, to be certified, to be exercised, there are brothers and sisters out there who are just waiting for that small act of kindness, that kind word, that thing that only you do, that will set about in them a series of things that will cause them to change and cause them to grow and cause them to come to the realization that God is Or as He said to Moshe, I am. That He is. But you don't understand. I really, look, I want to follow, but I need a pillar of smoke. Did you wake up this morning? Were you sick? Were you healthy? Could you breathe? You look over at somebody who's not doing so well. You're like, wow, I'm glad I'm not that guy. You didn't see that you woke up and your world is blessed? That you have been privileged? You don't see the blessing in your life this morning? Y'all are quiet. Y'all don't want to say that one. It's all right. Hey, look, if you don't see it, that's not my business, all right? I wake up. I see the blessings in my life. The fact that I'm waking up is this one. I knew many guys who went to Harlandale with me who didn't wake up in the morning. That was it. They went to sleep and that was the end of it. But I woke up. My soul returned to my flesh. I woke up. And I realized that I'm not going to be here forever, so this little bit of light that I am granted, I have to run in it as best that I can. And while you have the light within you, run. And when you're out of breath, take a breath, but run. And I know my brother and I, we're not big fans of running. Matter of fact, Zelie up there, she's completely not a fan of running. Nope, not going to do it. I'll give you $20. Nope, not going to do it. Wow, not even for 20. Seth would have ran around the house 4 times for $20. But he loves running. Years before this confrontation between the older brother and the grand vizier, we are introduced to Joseph's family, a family filled with hatred and dysfunction, filled with strife. Jacob openly favors Joseph over all his sons, and he makes no secret of it. Literally, the dreams of grandeur that he lords over his brothers. The brothers are angry, partly at their brother, but mainly at their parents' favoritism. Mainly at the parents' favoritism. And they direct all of their anger upon Joseph. So when the opportunity arises to do away with Joseph, only one brother, Reuben, hesitates. At a moment when Reuben is not present, it is Judah who convinces the brothers to take advantage of a passing caravan. Let us make some shekels in the process. Let us make some dollars in the process. And sell Joseph into slavery. Reference Genesis 37. In this way the brothers avoid bloodshed, although undoubtedly they know that the life of a slave is going to be incredibly challenging for someone who spent their whole life indoors and studying. All right, I got some military guys in here. A few former officers in here. How many people in here worked in the field? Actually out in the field, doing field work. How many people in here? No? Okay. Before that, did you have any reference point to it? Okay, you did. But you're of the age to have had reference points. You take one of the younger generation, right? If you had no reference to working out in the field, and then you got out there to work in the field, you're like, oh my gosh. What is this? True story. I took Marielli Moshe, and another youth. They went with me to go pick up donations for some institutions, right? And we were to drop off the foods and all that to the people who needed them. As we're going to go pick up the goods, the kids who were in the back seat, they said, "Why is everybody outside? Why is everybody outside?" They didn't understand this, right? They didn't get it. I said, well, because in this area, when you're bored and you tell your parents I'm bored, they say, well, go outside and find something to do. I know this is what they said to us as kids. There was always one thing at the end of it, of course, but don't get in
trouble.
See, 3 people knew this. The rest of y'all just don't want to admit it. So they had no reference. What is this outside stuff, right? What is this work in the field stuff? But it's a process. It's a process you have to be willing to embrace. Returning home, Judah and his remaining brothers are confronted full on with their father's grief, as Israel believes that Joseph is dead. I mean, the only reference that he has is a bloodied, tattered coat. How would you feel if a loved one, someone you hold dear, and you received news of that capacity? Everybody in your life that is close to you would know exactly what you're going through. They would hear about it. They would try and help you through it every single day. But the truth is, you would never fully get over it. When you have someone who's close to you and you lose them, you never fully get over that. There's that emptiness of that person in your life. There's that void. There's one thing that can help fill the void. It's being a part of a godly community, God being the center of it, and that helps. But still, you're reminded every now and again of that loss. All his sons and daughters, the Torah says in 37 and 35, all his sons and daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. How can I rest? My son has been murdered. How can I rest? They're speaking ill. How can I rest when... How can I... And so Judah and his brothers have to deal with that consequence. Of trying to comfort their father. Tell them I'll be right there, please. Thank you. Of trying to comfort their father for their lie. And the truth is, they didn't know at this point if Joseph was in fact dead or alive. They didn't have any, they just saw him be taken away. And if a slave by some other foreign nation was not a good working slave, guess what? Game over. Done. Years pass. Judah marries and has 3 sons of his own. The oldest, Er, grows into a young man and marries a woman named Tamar. Then suddenly Er dies. Since Tamar and Er have no children together, Judah sends his next oldest son, Onan, to act as the husband for Tamar, as custom demands. And Onan dies. Now Judah only has one child left, custom of the Levite marriage demands that Judah send his remaining son to Tamar. But Judah cannot bring himself to do it. I'm sorry. I have one son left in the house. I want to try and keep him there as long as possible. I hope you understand. It's nothing personal. Hey, look, I get it. We're the same way. And I know other people here who have children. They're the same way. Their youngest child, they try and babyfy that last child, right? Because this is my baby. This is the last one in the house. After that, it's just going to be me and him. Our getting together as a couple wasn't exactly daisies. And now he's old and moody. So we understand Judah's position. He says, I cannot bring myself to do it lest he die like his brothers. And then Judah confronts the grand vizier of Egypt and is a different man at this point. He is grieved. He has comforted his father. He has lost 2 of his own sons for his own transgressions. His anger, gone. He has nothing to be upset about at this point. I mean, carnally, he could probably justify being mad. But Levitically, he has no reason to be mad at all. Levitically, he needs to return to God. And this morning, some of us need to also let go of any of our anger, any of our issues, any of our pain. And perhaps, like Judah, be willing, actually be unwilling to inflict any more pain upon anybody else. Be unwilling to gossip about anyone else.